continuity if he were actually to lay there for posterity alongside the iconic figure of Latin American independence.
Not even Rómulo Betancourt, who was the one who restored democracy in Venezuela after the dictatorship of Pérez Jiménez, had even dare of thinking himself, next to Simón Bolívar. So this is, very strong point they're making, that he's going to be the new Simón Bolívar, and that's, it's a myth that can help Maduro right now to continue in power.
Do you think it's helpful? It's not sort of shoes that are too big to fill?
Oh, it might be at the end something, but not for Chávez, but for Maduro, to continue. At the end, people might say, well, you're not Chávez, you're not we are suffering because of shortage of electricity, you should be taking care of all these problems. And because he's not Chávez, he doesn't have the charisma, he doesn't have, maybe he won't be able to fill, this place that Chávez is living right now. Yeah.
And Doug, we're seeing all these regional heads of state who are a big part of this ceremony. We've discussed how he created this sort of regional unity, but who takes over at the head of that? Is there anyone who has the charisma to...
This is the big question, because he created several regional alliances. There was the Union of South American Nations. There was the Community of Latin American. I'm reading this because it's a list. Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, and then there was the famous Bolivarian Alliance for the Americas, which goes by the Spanish acronym ALBA, which was the very famous alliance. And that's really what it was all about. And can any other leader be sort of that cohesive force that can hold it together? You can argue, did actually Chávez himself ever really hold together these alliances? How much of these alliances were based on a slightly cynical calculation about oil wealth, oil imports, and energy needs, and all of that? But that's a debate for another day. But the fact is, on a symbolic level, yes, he saw himself as a regional unifier. More importantly, he saw himself as unifying the region against. He wasn't just unifying for the sake of unification. It was against a certain other type of idea, and that was the more imperialistic American idea, obviously embodied by the United States to the north. And those, if you had to sort of boil it down, whittle it down to the two pillars of his regime, it was that mixture of regional unity plus defiance at what he called the Empire to the north. So, and this is all being perpetuated today in these symbolic, the gathering around the casket, the honor guard, that first ceremonial honor guard of all of the closest allies, the ideological allies who, when at the end of the day, maybe actually weren't that close to him ideologically, but each of them having their various reasons for realizing that Chávez was a convenient ally, times a helpful ally, politically expedient ally.
And is perhaps one of the men and women that we saw surrounding his coffin there, looking forward perhaps to stepping out of Chávez's shadow? I mean, he was, like we said, he's a big figure. He's being made into an even bigger one. Is there room perhaps for someone else now to take over regionally?
Well, this all these different organizations, Latin American, and also what he called a new bloc of Latin America against the hegemony of the United States, and non-liberal, because he also stressed that this would be a non-liberal organization, was supported by oil, by Venezuelan oil. Will Maduro be able to continue giving all these opportunities for receiving oil at a very low price to all these countries? Will he continue to support Bolivia, for instance? I think Bolivia has already, there are already articles saying that Bolivia is a little bit worried, because they have received a lot of support from Venezuela.
And it's also interesting in the sense that economically, a lot of these other countries are starting to do pretty well for themselves. I mean, we talk about, yeah, he eradicated poverty at home, but he left his own economy not in great condition as far as the actual growth of the Venezuelan economy is concerned. A lot of the other regional economies were doing just as well, if not actually better. And, you take a country like Brazil, obviously its President Dilma Rousseff is there. Brazil is exactly. Brazil, we always speak of, it's the brick, right? The biggest emerging giant, really, of that region. And you can argue that Brazil, in many ways, is going to be sort of a model country going ahead for this region. In a sense, not stealing the mantle of Venezuela, but just claiming a mantle that, in a sense, always was there. It's been there. It's been a very fast-growing country with a lot of resources. Some would argue more natural wealth, besides oil, than Venezuela.
And I would add that, all these saying that Venezuela is allied with Brazil, but really who has been a winner in this has been Brazil. They have more than, triple their exports to Venezuela, from food to construction to, in different industrial areas. And on the other hand, Venezuela has been, on the contrary, seeing their exports to Brazil go down.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. We're going to cross over now to our correspondent in Caracas, Catherine Norris-Trent. Catherine, you're following this ceremony with us. Thank you for being with us. What's the atmosphere like in the streets of Caracas outside the military academy?
Well, people are watching this ceremony on big screens. Of course, been huge crowds gathered around the military academy complex where Hugo Chavez's body has been lying in state and where now this state funeral is taking place. So people there and in the streets and squares around that area been pouring into the streets, and many watching the ceremony on big screens. We've seen applause for Hugo Chavez's mother when she entered the chapel. She's been there for most of the last 3 days alongside her son. We've seen the family, very emotional scenes there as well, with lots of members of the audience at this funeral, the congregation rather, they're in tears. People in the streets have been in tears too, so it's a very emotional time.
And speaking of emotional reactions, we've just seen Iranian President Ahmadinejad tearing up there as he stands by the casket of Hugo Chavez. Catherine, has the news that the opposition is boycotting the swearing-in of Maduro this evening rippled through to the population yet?
Well, these reports are still emerging. I mean, it was only earlier today that we'd heard, or late last night, in fact, that the parliamentary speaker said that Vice President Nicolas Maduro would be sworn in after the ceremony. These arrangements had been kept under very tight wraps. Now there's been controversy about this because, according to some interpretations of Venezuela's constitution, it should be the parliamentary speaker who is sworn in as interim president rather than the vice president. There have been some dissenting voices about that, so it could stir up some more controversy as well.
Well, especially as considering the timing of this announcement, is that likely to go down well?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, there's a lot of noise where I currently am at the moment.
We're gonna leave you for the moment, Kevin. We'll come back to you in a minute. We're dipping back into developments inside the military academy in Caracas.
Llamamos al señor Teodoro Obiang
Mr. Teodoro Obiang Nguema, President of Equatorial Guinea.
El señor Sergei Lavrov,
Mr. Sergei Lavrov, Chancellor of the Russian Federation.
Mr.
San Spin, Minister of the National Commission for Development and Reform of the People's Republic of China.
Inicia
The
la
fifth
Guardia del
honorary guard now commences.
Todos de pie en este minuto en donde el presidente de Guinea Ecuatorial, la representación de Rusia y también el ministro de la Comisión Nacional de Reforma de la República Popular China se encuentran alrededor del féretro del presidente Hugo Chavez. Reiteramos, el gabinete ejecutivo, el tren ministerial del gobierno revolucionario, fue el alto mando militar del país y el pueblo venezolano unidos juntos en un mismo sentimiento en este momento histórico que se vive en la patria de Venezuela. Momento que queda sellado en el corazón de los venezolanos y sin duda en los libros de la historia de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.